Hello, and welcome to part 4 of Completionist Terraria. And in this part, we're going to be exploring the catacombs and the lower facilities. Most of the lower facilities, rather. So, in part 3, you could see this green jungle room in the right below the sewer. And that's because this is one of the lower facilities, and that's where we're going to be beginning. As you can see, it's made out of silver brick. So, again, this was part of the purpose, which was to use every material in the game, and I use silver brick for this kind of room. I was actually thinking, what do I use silver brick for? And I noticed silver brick has a very sort of clinical kind of look. It looks very sterile, and it does look fancy, but not too fancy. So that's why I used it to make a room where I initially planned on just growing things. I was going to grow hallow and crimson and corruption biomes, but instead I ended up mixing it with green torches and making a grow-up for herb and jungle. And it's effectively just a farm for collecting jungle seeds and life fruits. Also, I use it to fight Plantera occasionally, so there's a few gravestones from way back when Plantera killed me. So yeah. And we're going to go to the east here for a second and see there's more jungle on the ceiling here, so you have vines growing down. I just like the look of like a glass hall with like vines growing from the ceiling because of some like grow-up that we have going on. And this actually opens up into like a whole like canyon over here, so you could actually see like the depths of the canyon through the glass. Part of using every material includes using all the torches, so this was like where to use green torches, and this was where I'd use blue torches, right? What I have here is another farm, but it's a mushroom farm, and that's basically all it is it's a farm for mushrooms. Glowing mushrooms. I of course needed one to make furniture and stuff out of glowing mushrooms, so it did come in useful. Right here there's a passage that goes up to the sort of the Shroomite lab that I sort of teased in part 3, but we're not going to go there yet. That's going to be part of an entirely different video. So the wall and brick type here is mithril. It looked kind of turquoise, which made it look sterile as well, and it wasn't interesting enough for some of what I used the other bricks for, so I just ended up using it for this. Right here we're underwater, so I used waterfall block to cover this area. It looks kind of like that pipe in Super Metroid where you're going through like, what's that place called, Meridia, and you have water on all sides. Anyway, going this way. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about farms in Terraria. The thing is with farms is that I found that most of the things that I was farming I had enough of by the time I could actually build a farm. Because for me, the purpose is, of course, use every material and in a interesting way that makes sense. You know, making a farm for something that, you know, seems like a useful material that the denizens of Terraria land would use seems like a useful thing. Seems like an interesting thing that should be made. But by the time I actually made the farm, I didn't really need the material anymore. Like, most of the materials that I needed to gather a lot of are materials you can't farm, like adamantite and blue dungeon brick and furniture from dungeons and stuff like that. The stuff that you can farm, I mean, I didn't really need it, so I just ended up coming up with farms that were, you know, more so token farms that, you know, it made sense to have them in the world, and it made sense, you know, how they were built and out of what they were built and why they were built in the way that they were, like this sterile silver brick chamber. But they weren't really there for mega efficiency, or even, you know, mega aesthetics either. They were more so there to be tokens, and look good enough as tokens, and make sense as tokens, and that's exactly what you get here. So now moving on, we have platinum brick here. As we're going through this, you can notice that we've gone through, like, all the brick types. In part 1, I showed a chamber of tin brick, then we went to copper brick in part 2, part 3 was tungsten brick, then we have silver brick, and now platinum brick. Gold brick is in another part. But we're going through all the brick types because this is how I was coming up with ways of doing things with them. This platinum brick section is an aquarium. I have goldfish and piranhas and crabs and jellyfish and sharks all spawning in statues, and I have 4 different pools where they live. The water is, it's the same color as the water in the sewer. It's jungle water, so it looks kind of green and chloric, and You have you have diamond gem spark wall in the background that's lit up, so it looks very sort of like chlorine and Aquarius, and you know, it looks kind of like a facility almost. One could imagine it as some sort of testing facility or some sort of research facility as well, or that it could be used that way, or simply an aquarium, but it's not clearly not purely for aesthetic purposes. I of course added coral and seaweed and and shells and all that stuff. There's a fish mannequin right there, a mermaid mannequin right there, and use different materials: coral stone blocks, sand, stone, everything. Make 4 different chambers. Yeah, so that was basically it. You know, below the sewer and having a place to research animals, or simply look at them. Either way. So we're back here in the main shaft. I'm gonna call it the main shaft. This is a hell tunnel, as you recall. As you see, there's a sewer tunnel here that's just broken. There's no water coming out of it. It's just deteriorating. The sewer itself is like crumbling and falling apart. And we're going to go down to the next section. As you see, the brick color changed. And that's because this is blue dungeon brick. You see there's little skulls on it. That's because blue dungeon brick is way more appropriate for using in the catacombs, which is what layer we're in. We're in the catacomb layer. Now recall, this entire shaft is circular, or cylindrical. So these blue dungeon wall are actually like, they're along the curve of the shaft in the background. And you can imagine all kinds of little passages and crevices and you know, passes that these things connected to, and maybe other graves and catacombs back there. And it continues further down as well. This is, of course, an ancient Coran thing. This here is just like the main passage of the catacombs. This was stuff that the Corans used. This section especially was used to bury, you know, most of the people of the Coran civilization. Not the elites, not the bourgeoisie, closer to the, as you call them, closer to the proletariat, I suppose. So you can see there's lots of catacombs all over the place. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this section, so I'm going to try to ignore the stuff that's below for now. I just want to talk about where we're at right here. Now this... Okay, so this section right below me, this big section, this is the main train station. It's a subway for the entire world. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But what this room is specifically supposed to be, or what this whole area, what it's been repurposed to be, is sort of a waiting area, like, for the train station. You know, it's where people gather and wait for the train and explore, and they have books to read. It's sort of like a chill zone. The mechanic, this is usually where I keep her. She's not usually on the surface. As you can see, there's indented spots on the walls with catacombs in them and bricks covering them, being around them and stuff. There's boxes and all kinds of skull-themed stuff, because this was, you know, Coran architecture. This is what the Corans used to decorate their catacombs. So lots of skull-themed walls and stuff. Now, one thing about using all the different brick types is that I also needed to use all the different dungeon wall types, and there's 3 for each brick type. So what you have here mostly is blue tiled wall, which I think fits the catacomb field most of all. Normal blue and blue slab is usually used for the subway tunnels, but, well, there's blue slab right here as well. This room right here is supposed to be sort of like the main living quarters of the train operator or the train manager, that being the primary person that manages the train. I don't know why there's so many bunnies here. For some reason, this entire section is just like bunnies gather here all the time. I'm gonna destroy them. Anyhow. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know what about that is. Anyway, this entire area, you know, it was used by the Corans as a burial site. We were the ones. The new civilizations were the ones who came down, repurposed it, modernized it, built the subway, you know, and they are keeping most of this place just as like a museum. As you can see, there's more like blue dungeon stuff in the background there, because remember, we're beneath that, like, this is like a canyon in the background there, so you could see, you know, all kinds of more catacombs in the distance. So, and this section, again, it's like a museum. You know, we kept it. We kept the catacombs intact. You know, they're sort of ancient archaeological. They're guarded off by blue bricks, so you can't like get in there. That's what that's supposed to be, at least. You know, so you can't disturb them. Or in the very least, we're using them simply as, you know, decorative elements. But, you know, we're trying to preserve them as well, so it's important that you preserve it. Anyone who lives here or takes time to stay here preserves them and doesn't damage them. This section here is sort of like a hotel. At least that was the idea. There's like 4 chambers with a bathroom and a bed. This is where people who visit visit the main station by the tram or come down here, like visitors of the main castle, the capital. They would perhaps come down here and stay at this hotel. And right now, Odin's here for whatever reason. Maybe he's staying here. Maybe he's about to go some other part of the world. Who knows? As you can see, there's a passage here that goes back to the blue mushroom farm, which we're not going to get to. And it's another different part. But I could show it here. As you can see, there's all kinds of banners from skeletons and stuff, and all the dungeon-themed enemies, because that's the thing that makes the most sense. And you have diabolist lamps and all kinds of lanterns from the dungeon. And the whole section is used as a museum, and to show us what the Corans really built, and the place they buried their dead, most of their dead. This is one of the largest underground structures that the Corans had. Not counting the stuff that's in the desert, which we're not going to get to today. So, there's a bunch of stuff below us that I want to get to. But, okay. So, the main section here, as you can see, it's still part of the catacombs. This was a giant room when they found it, just full of catacombs. And what the new civs did, they opened up the area and turned it into a subway system. So you have a subway that's going, east and west, and there's stuff that's being stored here in crates and transportation because things are being hauled to different towns in different parts of the world, port and stuff like that. And you have dungeons, you have decorations. It's a central transportation hub, in other words. There are 10 different locations, at least along this subway line, which is the main subway line. I could do an independent video talking about how the actual subway system works. I'm not going to talk about that right now because that might take way too long. But basically the idea is you just select your station from one of the switches, hit the switch, and then it pops you onto the track and you fly to the other station. And at the other station it automatically pops you off the track. And that's 10 stations, so that's 9 different stations at 9 different locations you can go to from each station. So this is the center station, or rather it's the 5th station from the west end and the 6th station from the east end. And that's what we have here. So, yeah, that's basically this area. It used to be a giant, just basic burial site, and, well, I guess most of the catacombs were removed, or in the very least moved delicately, and to make room for a storage area and a transportation hub. This is a large transportation hub for people. Now we're going to go down in a sec, but first I want to go back here. As you can see, remember these are like the pipes. The honey one goes up to the honeycomb. The water one goes to the cistern. This is part 2 and 3 respectively. This is where the whole shaft I talked about sort of squeezes in and becomes tight. And down here you have the subway tunnel running through it, sort of being ruined because this is like background wall of the shaft where you see catacomb in the distance that's crumbling. The whole section's crumbling and it crumbles down below and stuff as well, although there's a ladder that you can go down. So yeah, this is still part of the catacombs. The catacombs actually extend further to the west into the desert, right? They extend from the desert through this section all the way to the east, all the way to where the main station is that I showed you. Now, this is another part of the catacombs, right? So this one's made out of green dungeon brick, and as you can see, it's a little fancier. It's got green tiled wall, which looks a lot fancier. It's got some nice chandeliers. It's got skeletal hangings. It's got what do you call them? Brass shelves, which are really fancy. It's got just way more fancy. The idea is that this was probably where some more important, more elite people were buried. Perhaps not world leaders or kings or warriors or anything like that, but very important people, magistrates, archons, who knows it, maybe great artisans, great artists, important peoples. Could be interesting to actually like put up signs to have, reading about the people who died as some sort of lore thing. That might be an interesting idea. Might end up doing that. Haven't done that yet, anyway. So yeah, and as you see, it extends a little bit underground as well. We're not going to go into that section right now, but that is a much later section. That's part of the desert video. The desert is to the west, which we're very close to. Now, before proceeding, so now I just want to cover the sections right below, and we're going to go to where those 2 pipes lead, because I'll finish the story of these magic pipes. So what we have right here, this cobalt brick room, This is a chamber that I've actually talked about a lot, that you've heard me talk about. This is the nexus. This is the main teleportation, transportation hub of the entire world. It leads to most important teleportation spots in the main hub, in the capital, below the capital, and even somewhat to the immediate left and right, east and west of the capital. The reason I used cobalt brick, I came upon the idea I needed to use, the hard mode brick types, and mithril looked way too clinical. Mithril looked way too sterile. Cobalt looks kind of, it looks kind of not mysterious, but it looks kind of high tech. I don't know if like high tech is necessarily the right word, but it's something of a mix between like high tech and like fancy ancient. So that's sort of why I used it this way. Now, it's very debated about whether or not this chamber was actually Coran. It might have actually been something the Corans themselves repurposed from some other, maybe a precursor civilization. Because if, the look does not match Coran architecture at all. Of course, the various teleportation locales were not set by the Corans or anyone, but, the teleportation hub was already there. We simply repurposed the technology and linked it to the locales we wanted to go to, the new civs, that is. So right here you have the factory wing, connects to the castle towers. There's, there's 10, 14 locations. You got the armory right here, right below the garden, right there. We got the cistern control, that's right here. This was part 3. We got the honeycomb. Yep, we were there as well. So, and here we got the lava forge as well. You got some other locations. We are going to visit all of them eventually. Oh, one more thing. I just want to show off the wiring right here. Yeah, I'm going to show off the wiring of this whole section. As you can imagine, being the central transportation hub of the world, it's pretty nasty with regards to wiring. There's a lot of different wires everywhere. There's a lot of different complexity. Most of the wiring here is for the train station itself, and of course some of it is for the nexus. So this is the nexus, and it's very simple. Very simple idea. It was just to use cobalt brick, and I think it's the most appropriate use of cobalt brick, at least so far. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about this section right here. This is the deep factory. This is the most accessible factory for me when I'm not in the main castle. The main castle has a lot of the crafting stations, but it doesn't have all of them, and I simply felt that it didn't have room to include all of them. I needed something more very factory-esque to include the rest, so I built the deep factory down below. This whole area, the adamantite brick, this is all new Civ stuff. This is not Coran, this is not precursor, it's new Civ. They used adamantite beams. Adamantite beams look very modern, very, very industrial, and that's precisely what we have here. We have all of the different crafting stations. We have the ability to make asphalt, shroomite, and all the various kinds of furniture types. The only thing that isn't here is the ability to make lunar equipment, and that's about it. Of course, I have adamantite beams coming from the ceiling, and I have cogs behind the walls and stuff, and I have some silver brick. I have some silver brick lining the sort of the bottom where the people actually walk around, because again, it has that sort of clinical, sterile look, and mixed with the industrial look, it looks pretty decent, I think. Right, so we have more crafting stations here, and a forge, and of course, again, you can make anything down here. There's enough room, there's enough crafting stations for anything. It's just not where most materials are held. Right. It's simply where I'd need to go if I wanted to make something sort of more specific. But in theory, it's something people could use to make more stuff that isn't specific. Of course, in lore, you have to keep in mind that the main castle isn't the factory where everything is made, even though in gameplay it could be used that way, because there's no, like, I mean, it doesn't matter where the crafting station is, it could be used for everything. But, like, in lore, you can imagine that a forge can't be used to make thousands of, like, bars of brick in a second like it can in the game. So that's why I'm saying that there's, like, another forge down here that people who work down here use it to create the materials that, the capital and the main compound we use to build various things and construct various things and, you know, to expand the civilization. And right here is where I actually keep Cornelia, the steampunker. This is actually gray this is adamantite beam wall painted gray. I actually built this room before cog wall existed, so that's why it's just like a steampunk room but without cog wall. Anyway, this is where she stays. Again, a lot of bunnies gather here for some reason, but that's the thing. Anywho, that's pretty much it. We're not gonna... So, there's a large section that's gonna be to the east here that I haven't finished building, so I'm not gonna go there yet. I just want to show off the lava forge, because that's the last part of sort of the catacomby section of the world, and it's right below us. It's the lava forge right here. This is the teleporter. Well, we're just gonna go down. Right, so you see the main shaft continuing down here. This actually, okay, I'm not going to talk about what's over here to the west right now, but this section specifically that's part of the main shaft, the idea is that the main shaft is actually, it expands a little bit over here, but in the positive, like, Z direction. So it expands towards the screen, so you don't actually see the expansion. The idea is that this part of this, like, pink brick chamber, it's not, this isn't the entirety of the shaft. This is like the back of the shaft where this pink brick indent is in the wall, and it's, you see crumbling above and below. But anyway, it's not that important. So, what we have here are a lava forge. Quite simply, it's the same thing as the honeycomb and the cistern, but for lava. I built it thematically to be sort of in tune with the way everything else worked. The honeycomb made sense to be up in the tree. You know, cistern control made sense to be in the sewer. This, it makes sense to be underneath all of the delicate stuff up above. You know, lava can be destructive if there's a spill. And here, we actually see the two pipes coming down. I drew them all the way back down here to the chamber below, and we'll get there in a second. But yeah, you have lava pumps 1 through 3. You can turn them all on. Here's the teleporter that goes back to the nexus. And this whole thing is made out of obsidian and sort of, it was built out of safe materials. Haven't figured out, this is mostly new Civ stuff. This is, you know, very little, some chambers here were probably Coran, but the new Civs repurposed them and made them, you know, repurposed them. And whatever their use was before, they were either, you know, pretty much abandoned or not used very much. As you can see, there's the lava operator, whoever he is, lives down here. There's a bed here, a bookcase, you know, a bit of a meeting, sort of lounge room as well. You know, a break room for the employees that work down here. Makes perfect sense. And we're going to go down to this lower section as well, right here. The lower section, as you could probably guess, is a mixer. This is what we call the mixer. It is effectively exactly what you would expect it to be. It is a place where you can mix lava, honey, and water all at once. I'm going to turn this off before it floods and destroys everything. That's the idea. Giant obsidian, sort of round room. You know, you have the pipes coming down here, and that's why the pipes are coming down here to this pump. This pump goes all the way back up to the honeycomb. These two pumps go up to the cistern and suck water out of there. This pump goes to this lava vat right here and pumps lava down here. The whole point is to have a farm that you can use to make crispy honey, honey block, and obsidian. Or straight up, yeah, you can't duplicate liquids here, but you can mix them together. All in one melting pot, because why not? Could have an individual melting pot for every combination, crispy honey, honey block, and obsidian. In fact, that might make some sense, but I suppose in lore, the idea is just the mixer's always cleaned before it's used again, and whenever we're making one type of material, we just, you know, put in those two materials at once. But if somebody wanted to fuck with us, fuck with the new Civs, I suppose what they could do is, you know, turn all the pumps at once and screw everything up. So, I mean, you could actually do that. Turn on all the pumps like this. Just so we have the option of doing that. This goes back to what I said about farms, that I didn't really need farms. By the time I had this built, I didn't need these liquids. You know, in fact, the whole reason to make this liquid was to, you know, one of the reasons to need liquids in the first place was to make this place. You know, but I did not need, you know, obsidian anymore. I collected like an enormous amount of obsidian just by exploring caves and combining, like, making water caves flow into lava caves and combining that stuff. I didn't really need this at all. It's just, you know, a token farm to be there. That's why it's not super efficient. You know, it's efficient in lore, it's efficient in setting, you know, it's useful in the world. It doesn't really, you know, matter that much in terms of gameplay, you know, unless we want it to. But that's pretty much it. Everything that was built precisely so that it would service the main setting. So that it would service, you know, what the game would be from an in-game RPG perspective. And you see here you have a lava pipe which goes back up. And the idea here is that this lava pipe has actually burst and lava flowed out in this whole section. You have lava all over the place. So what the builders did was they blocked it all off rather than just getting rid of it. This was before this whole tunnel was excavated, and so they put up, you know, glass to protect it. You know, the material that they had, for whatever reason, they put up glass to prevent the lava from rushing in and burning people, so you could still pass through the area. And so it ended up looking like, you know, they ended up using lava fall wall and lava fall block, and that's how I use lava fall wall and lava fall block, at least mostly, partially. So yeah, this is where the main shaft becomes dangerous, because you actually sort of have to walk through, you know, this like lava held by bubbles to go down there. But this is the part where, like, if no one really uses the main shaft for transportation anymore anyway, although there is a rope down there, so people could, in theory, if they wanted to, but nobody really uses it. Also, the idea is that this lava, although it's here in, like, in gameplay, the idea is that you could go into this section without actually touching the lava. So this isn't, like, this isn't a lore thing, the lava that's between the bubbles. Anyway, that's pretty much that. That's the mixer, that's this whole section. That's all I wanted to show here, and I think in the next episode, I'm just going to go to the surface now, because what we've done here is we've basically explored the entirety of the main compound, or rather what I consider to be the main compound. We're back in the nexus right here, and we go all the way back to the factory wing right here, and we're back here. And this was the main compound. I mean, this was the main area of the world. You know, main castle, party tree, sewer, you know, catacombs, etc. All that stuff down there. So we've explored it all at this point, and, well, pretty much all of it. You know, all the main stuff. So what's going to happen now is we're going to head outside of the castle, outside of the main compound, to the areas adjacent to it. And what's going to happen is we're going to head east into the Hallow, and that's going to be part 5. So yeah, that was it. That was it for part 4, and I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think and everything like that. Farewell and cheers.